Hello and welcome to another episode of Vaguely Related. Today I have a video planned out where we'll talk about the connections between virality, AI, algorithms, and how our society is kind of just feeling this lack of deep connections as a whole and how it's all related. So things we're going to cover today are what people are calling the nonchalance epidemic and this slow death of individuality that makes people afraid to be cringe. Like, that's the worst thing in the world. Then I'm going to talk about how AI and algorithms are pushing this conformity even further. Then how we're seeing people say they have less genuine connections with people they love and how that might relate to the increase in screen time with strangers. Then I'll touch on brain rot, trends, personal aesthetics that make a person brand themselves instead of just being uniquely who they are on their internet presence. And then at the end, I want to talk about how people are recognizing this and pushing back. And the good news is that there seems to be some kind of solution, though we haven't figured out exactly what it is yet. Things like deleting social media, going analog, using a flip phone again, just other ways to get back this genuine connection in our technology-obsessed, fast-paced world that prioritizes efficiency over real, genuine connections. So what made me so interested in this topic and caused me to start digging into it in the first place is that I've noticed people just seem afraid to be weird. And say what you want about it, but being weird is the truest expression of your unique self. And being okay with being weird, I think, shows a confidence that a lot of young people are missing. In this day and age, everything seems to conform to a side or a trend, and it makes everyone a bland photocopy of everyone else. It's like we get uncomfortable by someone's individuality or oddities or weirdness, but really we should be embracing that, because that's what makes each one of us so human. Cringe, corny, weird. People have always needed a term to describe someone who is different or stands out in some kind of way. And the people who feel threatened by individuality, by authenticity, they eventually end up coming around, because every visionary will be misunderstood. They're ahead of their time. They pave the path for the culture to come. It's the people who got mocked the most who are the true visionaries. Lady Gaga has always taken big creative risks, which didn't come without scrutiny from the public eye. But her commitment to her craft influenced the whole modern pop genre. And then you can think of artists like Prince, who was mocked for being too eccentric. Though now his dance moves and his refusal to be controlled by the music industry have paved the path for so many musicians, because he wasn't willing to sacrifice his commitment to his craft or his true self, even when record labels were telling him to do otherwise. Another example is David Bowie, a musician who was revolutionary for his time. He challenged traditional gender norms when it came to self-expression, and refused to be fit into just one genre. But while other people were calling him weird or a misfit, he was paving the path for rock stars to come. And along the way, he gave courage to people who similarly felt like misfits. And then there's even visual artists like Van Gogh, who, though we think of him as one of the most famous artists today, actually had almost no recognition during his time, dismissed for being too radical, too different. Yet it's his art that's credited with inspiring greats like Matisse, Klimt, Soutine, Picasso. And that's what real art is. Real art inspires. And inspiration ripples. It even inspired Anne Sexton, who inspired Emily Dickinson, who is said to have inspired Taylor Swift, and the list just keeps going on. So maybe right now it's in to be nonchalant or cool. You'll never create true art or make lasting impressions unless you tap into your true, authentic self and all the weird eccentricities that come with it. People joke, and there's even a trend about things AI couldn't recreate, but it's true. AI has not had these human experiences. It can take from other people's writings about their human experiences, but that's derivative. That's all copied. None of it is inspired or based on true emotion. What we should fear isn't being cringe, which is really just passion, enthusiasm, and joy, but conformity, the one thing that AI does have the power to create. I saw this really interesting article on this, which is where they coined the term the nonchalance epidemic, and I just want to read a section from it. Which is why I say with dejection that the era of the shrug is upon us. It sucks the life out of you, this unspoken agreement that nothing can be too important. It seeps into how we create, how we engage with the world, how we love. Reply times have to be carefully considered, not too fast, not too slow. You shouldn't post too much because you'll be self-obsessed, nor too little. Irrelevant. Your caption should be witty yet effortless, enthusiasm measured, your presence felt, but not overwhelming. Every interaction is a calculation, a delicate balancing act between seeming interested and laid back. Ironically, being this way takes far more conscious effort than authenticity, a constant performance of trying too hard. It strips joy down to something palatable, manageable, something small enough to hold in one hand, as long as you don't grip too tightly and scare it off. The author of this article then goes on to say how the true problem with this is that it hinders real human connection, because if we're not showing up as our true, authentic selves online, and online is the only place that we're allowing ourselves to branch out and create new friendships, then we're never going to feel lasting, true connections. And I think this is where we need to reclaim our individuality and embrace your cringiness, because if people are cringing at you, at least you're doing something right. Think of it this way. When you're young and you're trying to make friends for the first time, either in middle school or high school, you'll often hear the phrase, put yourself out there. Just put yourself out there. Just be yourself. And while it may just be a saying that everyone says, it actually does have some truth to it. And what that is that when you're outward about what you like, what you enjoy, what you feel like you're good at, and you communicate that out to the world, you will start to attract people who are interested in the same things. And it can be the smallest things too. Like in elementary school, I loved silly bands, okay? They are my favorite thing ever. And there was a group of kids on the playground that would trade silly bands. And so because I saw that they had silly bands and I liked silly bands, why wouldn't we become friends? Because we like the same thing. That's just how it works. Fortunately, I don't have any silly bands anymore, but I can still make friends by showing what I like. I joined a book club because I liked the book that they were reading, and then I found that I had so much in common with these people. There's adult ways to do it too. But when you're engineering your online persona to a fake version of yourself that doesn't really exist, you're going to attract the people that you actually aren't interested in because you're not going to be able to create any deep connections with those people. And there's data showing this lack of connection and general unhappiness as well. In Nature Mental Health, they recently published a study that young adults aren't as happy as they used to be. And this is something that for decades, research has showed that the way people experience happiness is actually supposed to be a U-shaped curve across their lifetimes. So usually happiness is high when they're young and then might dip midlife, but rise again when they're older. But when you're young, you're kind of expected to be happier in your life. And I wonder if it's because we've all started to conform so much to this sameness, pushing away our individuality, when individuality is the one thing that helps young people especially grow and connect with each other, creating a gap that we're all now missing. And there's other things that I've noticed just in pop culture and social media that have been kind of concerning to me too.
It's called like Instagram face. How all of these women's faces look exactly the same because of like filters and fillers, injections, and the whole point that she makes in the video, which is really fascinating, is you get like positive reinforcement.
Exposure to the modern internet isn't just influencing the conformity of our minds, but the way people are tweaking their appearance to look the same now too. All celebrities have the same smiles, and when one stands out, they get mocked for it. It's more common to see someone who's modified their face or their body so much that they don't even look like themselves, so that when someone does embrace their natural traits, they're hailed as being refreshing, like natural is no longer the baseline. With the constant influx of consumerist micro-trends, people are all wearing the same things, are all buying the same products, are all becoming the exact same person. Trends used to be a way to hop on a funny meme, but now with algorithms, they give us a chance to participate in something viral, the chance to conform and shape your whole identity so that you can be trending too. Collective Illusions is a study by Todd Rose that talks all about conformity bias, which is the tendency to agree with the opinions and beliefs of others, even when one may consider them incorrect. He calls these collective illusions because they appear when people get swayed by the popular opinion of a group. Even if they privately reject it, they just decide to go along with it. This is similar to another phenomenon called groupthink, where people are abandoning their own critical thinking in an effort to either fit in or not be embarrassed by being wrong, even though they might know that they're right. And it is true that people are more likely to go along with the consensus, and it does make us more susceptible to propaganda and manipulation. And when you think of virality too, think about the videos that are being offered up to you on social media platforms. They typically are the ones that have the most likes and the most views, and that's because they're performing well, and the algorithms know that they will continue to perform well if they serve them to you. But it makes an ecosystem on social media that is made up of very few voices that are all talking about their own opinions that a large collective amount of people will take as fact, and just because they have all these likes and views does not mean that what they're saying is true. And artificial intelligence only multiplies this. And while you might think, what does this have to do with personal connections? It has a lot to do with how we shape our own individual selves and how we think critically based on the kind of information that we're consuming on a day-to-day basis. To try and understand how the content that we're consuming is affecting us, I did some research on how algorithms are pushing out recommended content on YouTube, TikTok, and Meta platforms, and I found some interesting information. In a study done by the Brookings Institute, they found that YouTube typically recommends more mainstream content. And as users continue to watch videos, it continues to push them down what we would call a rabbit hole, or a narrow ideological range of content that can further reinforce values that they might already have or make them even more extreme. They also found that the YouTube recommendation algorithm pulls users slightly to the right of the political spectrum, even if they weren't right-leaning in the first place. Last week I made a video about the polarization of feminism, which if you have any questions or even hesitations about feminism as a movement, I would definitely recommend watching, but it does make me think about how polarization as a whole could be caused by things like these search engines that are pushing us to one extreme or the other, and it's worrisome to think about how that might be exacerbated as we continue to integrate things like this into our lives. And then I also read this New York Times article called How TikTok Reads Your Mind. And it's interesting first to think about, which I knew that there were so many people on TikTok, but there are 1 billion people, literally 1 billion, who use TikTok monthly. And when we think about it as a social media app, it's a social media app that recommends strangers content. and serves more as entertainment than any kind of connection to friends. So thinking of it as a way to stay connected with friends is not even really a pillar of the platform. The New York Times got this document from a TikTok exec that I guess they weren't supposed to have insight into that revealed some of the company's goals, and it's very interesting to look into. It said that the company's ultimate goal was to add daily active users, and to do this, they optimized towards two main metrics, which are retention, ensuring a user comes back, and time spent, meaning even though we already are plagued by way too much screen time, this app wants to take more of it from us. But I mean, I love TikTok too, so please don't ban TikTok. So because of this, the algorithm optimizes towards getting people addicted to content rather than giving them content that they really want. Even if you think that you're controlling your content by liking things that you like and scrolling quickly past things that you don't, the algorithm is actually not recommending things that you like, but things that you might interact with, which could be negative as well. And this part was really interesting to me. It said that some creators might have videos that reference other content that you would have already had to watch to understand it, or that you need to watch more of their content to understand more. And the algorithm will prioritize serving you this kind of content because it knows that you're going to have to go into a further rabbit hole to understand it more, which means spending more time on the platform. And another kind of content that gets prioritized is the kind that can be monetized. Again, pushing us all into this new kind of world where we suddenly have to brand ourselves to exist online. It's like trends and aesthetic have to define us instead of just allowing us to post things that show our personal taste. Everything is curated. Everything has to have the ability to be monetized. I saw this really great video on YouTube by Just Olivia called Discovering Your Personal Taste and Ignoring the Internet, and she kind of talks about this problem. And although it seems simple, what her main message is ignore the internet and like whatever you like, not because it's trending and not because you know it's going to get you a lot of views. Abandon that in your real life because your real life is not your online life. She talks about how social media can heavily influence our choices, even when it comes to the books that we read and the TV shows that we watch. And sometimes that can be because of the hype. Like I know I started watching White Lotus because so many of my friends were talking about it and I didn't want to be left out. But we also have to pay attention to the things that stimulate our mind and bring us joy. And just going off on a little tangent here, but that's honestly why I love the library. Sorry, bigger tangent than maybe you expected. But the library doesn't always have the most recent books, doesn't always have the things that are trending on Book Talk or TikTok. And with a library, you kind of just have to make the choice for yourself. And when I go to a library, I mean, obviously I look at the covers, but you read through all the excerpts and you read through the summaries and you decide based on that and based on what you know about yourself, what you think that you're going to like. It seems so simple, but just knowing yourself in that way, knowing enough to recommend a book to yourself and not pick up a book because it has 4 stars on Goodreads or because everyone on the internet is reading it right now, it can give you a different perspective and it can even help cultivate that individuality if you feel like it's something that you're missing. Because if we're all reading the same books, watching the same TV shows, doing the exact same things, that's going to push our conformity as a society even further. And then where does the individuality go? Where does the weirdness go? Where does our uniqueness go? Like that is the most important part about being ourselves, is having those weird little quirks or things that you can distinguish between people, and that's how you can find who's going to be your friend. If I walk into a room and everyone's the same, I'm not going to want to be friends with everyone. I'm probably going to leave being friends with nobody because there was nothing distinguishing about them that I could pick out that we could relate with. But as we know, algorithms want to define you. They work better if they can fit you into a box or resurface your content to the same people who have the same likes about the same things, and you even get punished if you try to create outside of that box. Talking from experience, I know that 300 view jail very well. That's, you don't know, on TikTok, if you start posting a different kind of content than the algorithm is used to, you're only getting 300 views because it's going to keep pushing it out to the same people who like the kind of content you created before, but aren't necessarily going to like this new version of yourself, and then your content doesn't thrive. And as a creator too, when you feel like you're only getting 300 views when you usually get thousands, it can be like, well, if it's not working, I guess I should go back to what I was doing before, even if it's not authentic to the kind of person that you feel like you are. And it really hinders personal growth too. And it perpetuates this idea that like, if you're like everybody else, everyone's going to like you more. And everybody knows how that goes. Everybody went to middle school or high school. Everyone knows about popularity. But to think that we have to live through that, even as young adults, even as adults in this social landscape, does not sound good to me. So it is harder to show up authentically, but when I think about it, I have never felt more free as when I can look back and laugh at myself for being embarrassing, because at least I know that I was being true to myself. And if those people laughed at me too or didn't understand me, then it brings me so much more clarity about the kind of people I should have in my life, because if they don't understand me or if they want to make fun of me for being my true self, I don't want them in my life. And there are billions of people in this world. Not everybody has to be your friend. Genuine connections are made up by showing your true self And not everyone's gonna like your true self, and that's okay. I want to go back to a topic I touched on a little bit earlier, which is that when we are in this social landscape and we're spending so much time, even the majority of our days scrolling online, it's like we're giving more time to content that we're comfortable with from strangers who say words that soothe us or that we know that we can zone out watching, and then leave no time for real conversations with real people in our lives, even the ones that we would say that we love. When you think of opening TikTok, the first page that comes up is for you. It's not the following page. And that means that you're interacting immediately with content from other people, not anyone that you actually know, spending more screen time with strangers than people that we love. Then we wonder, when it comes to dating, why we have to use apps and why we can't make genuine connections in real life anymore. I read an article by APA that talked about dating apps and the future of dating apps. Even though it feels like dating apps have just become a thing, it is interesting to think about how AI and things like ChatGPT have been influencing this even further, with people even using ChatGPT to create their opening lines or using some kind of AI to respond for them because we can't do it ourselves and we are so afraid of these genuine connections that we need machines to do it for us, but yet we expect a real relationship to come out of it. In the article, it talks about how Gen Z especially has grown up in this environment of dating apps and social media that have always been available to them. So even just the idea of meeting someone face to face without technology can be scary. And when you think of a dating app, you're given summaries of a person so you can make judgments on them before you even have a first conversation with them. On a profile, you're given stats like height, political ideology, college, job, all of these things that you can either raise a red flag or a green flag on, swipe left or swipe right, and do it in less than a second, losing any kind of nuance or connection that might be in between. Because when you think about it, in real life, the people that we meet, they might have horrible stats. They might have things about them that if you were looking at them at a piece of paper, you would not have talked to them. But because you're meeting them in real life, you get to see how they really are, you get to interact with them, and you don't have to judge them in less than a second. Because not everyone is so great at putting themselves online, and that's okay. Not everyone is the best at revealing their true selves in less than a second. But when you can have a genuine conversation with someone and you can take some time to learn where they come from, the things that they've experienced and who they really are, and really get to know them, then you can start to make genuine connections. This isn't anything against dating apps. I know that for some people it really is necessary. When you think about the spaces that we inhabit and working from home all the time, it can be really hard to meet new people. But I think it just has something to do with how quick we are to judge, how quick we are to do everything in this digital world, and how in the process we've given up deep connections. And as young people continue to feel these lack of connections and dating apps continue to evolve with AI, there have even been apps for finding friends and communities to relate with because we're having such a hard time doing it on our own. Apps like Bumble Friends help connect friends together based on the same kind of criteria as a dating app. And living in New York, I saw a ton of these new things popping up where people would have dinner parties with strangers, people would go read books with strangers, or just activities with strangers was a really big trend that I had been noticing in the past year. And it really speaks to how we want to connect. Like, people are actively looking for friends and connections, and we just don't know where to find them. And maybe these activities with strangers are the way to do it, but if we think that a dinner with a stranger is a quick fix or hearting someone on a dating app is gonna get you a best friend for life, it's not that easy. We do have to make intentional efforts to show our true selves to other people so that we can allow those true connections to happen. There's a well-known philosopher named George Gurdjieff who had a lot of thoughts on this subject and is known for famously stating that 200 conscious people could change the whole of life on Earth. Specifically, conscious people is what he calls out because a lot of his thoughts and teachings were focused on this, that individuals need to become more aware of themselves, their thoughts, and their feelings, and that true connection is not a passive thing at all, but a very intentional, conscious effort made up of actions that must be cultivated and cannot be habitual. Which is just a way of saying that we need to be intentional with our connections and we need to get to know ourselves first so that we can make these intentional connections. And we can't expect to make any of these deep connections if we are just doom scrolling, laying around, and not making any real effort. And that's not always easy in what people are calling this epidemic of constant communication. I read an article about this epidemic, and it talks about how our fast-paced society rewards speed so much more than connections, making it harder to ever find that depth that we all crave. The author of this post writes that it seems as though people have forgotten that relationships are meant to enrich our lives, not consume them. Love should be something that strengthens you, not something that makes you feel like a shell of yourself, hollowed by the weight of someone else's expectations. Instead of allowing love to be a space of trust, it has, for many, become a performance, a constant proving, a fear of falling short. We are living in an epidemic of constant communication. Love, once measured by presence and understanding, is now quantified by response times and message frequency. Love shouldn't be a quiet battle over who cares more. It should be felt in the spaces between words, in the trust that lingers even in silence, even miles apart. The right person won't demand proof of love. They'll know it's there, unspoken but unwavering. We're so used to being so connected all the time that we expect constant replies. This constant communication can lead to a sense of overwhelm that makes it hard to want to even maintain these connections, even if they're not as deep as you want them to be, because you just can't keep up. Sometimes it's too hard to keep up with it all. And if you look at the data, we're not keeping up. A new Harvard study showed that just 17% of Americans felt that they had a deep social connection with someone else, and this surveyed people from the ages of 18 to 29 years old. In that same study, it said that less than half of young Americans polled felt that they had a strong sense of community anywhere, and almost 1 in 3 are still searching for a sense of belonging or feel like they just don't have one. You would think that being more connected than ever technologically would allow us to feel that connection in our everyday lives, but that's not true. Technology and this fast-paced modern life has actually resulted in a lack of these genuine, meaningful connections. And social media, while you think it would make it better, actually makes it worse by fostering the impression that we have friends by liking someone or following their page in less than a minute. But then when you're all alone and your phone's turned off, you realize you actually have nobody, or nobody that truly understands who you are. If you say you're too busy for these things or you're too busy for deep connections, that's not true, and it's not healthy for you either, because connection is what keeps us strong when we get stressed out or overwhelmed. These connections are the people that we can go to and we can trust when we feel like we can't handle things by ourselves, which will inevitably happen. Studies even show that connections reduce cortisol, which is the stress-causing hormone, lowers inflammation, and boosts oxytocin, which improves trust and well-being. In Love 2.0, psychologist Barbara Fredrickson wrote that people build resilience not by going at it alone, but by leaning into love and micro moments of connection. Because when we're lonely or we're feeling lost or just don't know what to do with our lives, what we really crave is real connection. Personally, I always thought I was pretty good at maintaining real, deep conversations, but then I just recently got around to watching the Before trilogy, and if you haven't watched those movies, they are literally life-changing. You need to watch them, but also don't take my word for it. Watch whatever you want to watch. Be individualistic, But Before Sunset and Before Sunrise are these amazing movies about these two people who meet at different points in their lives, and the entire movie is just a conversation. It is just the two characters talking back and forth to one another. I watched on a plane back from Europe just a few weeks ago, and I felt jealous. I craved a conversation like that so badly. I couldn't remember a time in my life that I'd ever had a conversation that was that deep. And it was just these two young people on a train, these strangers who were unashamed at sharing these parts about their lives, talking about stories from their childhood, things that defined them, that made them who they were. And because they were able to share so much about their lives and be so vulnerable with each other, they were able to create these intense conversations that led to lasting relationships. There's so many great quotes from those movies, but when I think about specific scenes that really made impressions on me, it was in the first movie.
You on holiday?
I don't really know what I'm on.
Okay.
I'm just traveling around. I've been riding the trains for the past 2-3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. You were visiting friends or just on your own?
Yeah, I had a friend in Madrid, but
Madrid, that's nice.
yeah, I got one of those Euro passes. Is what I did.
That's great. So has this trip around Europe been good for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's been it sucked.
What?
No, it hasn't. It's had its well, I'll tell you, sitting, for weeks on end looking out the window has actually been kind of great.
What do you mean?
Well, for instance, you have ideas that you ordinarily wouldn't have.
What kind of ideas?
You want to hear one?
Yeah, tell me.
All right.
I think we would actually learn so much about ourselves if we did give ourselves time to just look out the window or just think, because I think we should all be trying to constantly learn more about ourselves, because when we know ourselves more deeply, we can get to know other people more deeply too. And then there's the line that always gets me in the movie.
Oh God, why didn't we exchange phone numbers and stuff? Why didn't we do that?
Because we were young and stupid.
You think we still are?
I guess when you're young, you just believe there'll be many people with whom you connect with. And later in life, you realize it only happens a few times.
Yeah, you can screw it up. Misconnect.
And so I think if you do have deep connections with people, it's so important to make sure that we continue to cultivate them so that we don't lose them. Because it's not until we have the distance and the experience that we can realize how important that connection really was. I watched this interesting video from NYU professor Susie Welch where she talked about the concept of expedience in our lives. She talked about how expedience, or ease, will lead us to places in life that we don't actually enjoy. She questions how we can feel content with things like our jobs and our connections in life when we prioritize ease and not our true values. It makes me wonder if we're making online connections that are shallow just because they're easier, or even in our friend groups, if we're making friends with people who live close to us just because it's easier to walk to their house than take the train or drive. And if we're prioritizing ease over everything else, is maybe that why we feel like nobody truly understands who we are? And while it's not a direct product of AI, it's definitely a product of the fast-paced, rewards-based culture that encourages us to prioritize efficiency over everything else. And efficiency is productive, yes, in a capitalist society, but it does nothing to cultivate human happiness. And now I want to talk about how AI is exacerbating this even more by endangering our unique thought and personality and even breeding illiteracy among people. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, the percentage of U.S. adults ages 16 to 65 who fall in the lowest level of literacy has increased from 19% in 2017 to 28% in 2023. And an article called "The Decline of Literacy and the Rise of AI" reasons that this reflects a broader collapse in critical thinking as a whole. And I found a lot of data that show the same kind of number of decreasing literacy among school children too, showing that children's reading skills in the US have continued to decline yearly following the COVID-19 pandemic. And whether that's because online schooling became a thing or because technology has become so much more integrated since then, I don't know the exact reason to, but what this article says is that this decline in literacy is not an outlier. It's an ongoing cultural shift that spells great danger and instability for our future. The rise of anti-intellectualism and a complete over-reliance on artificial intelligence platforms. Across the nation, the basic skills of reading and comprehension have been devalued over recent years. Intellectual curiosity among younger generations has grown weaker, and AI is rapidly replacing human thought. AI is a helpful tool. For a lot of people, it can help replace those menial tasks and can free up a lot of extra time. But if we use it to replace our critical thinking, that's where the problem can come in. It's crazy to think that even reading now can be replaced by AI by some degree. And for me, as I'm a big reader, but don't look at those books behind me. I'm at my parents' house, so I read a lot more colorful books, not just self-help books, don't worry. But it is odd to think because reading is an experience. It's an emotional experience. It's when a mood transcends you when you're reading, that's when you can really feel and relate to the character and build empathy in it. But if you use AI to create a summary of a book, you're not going to feel any of that. You might get the gist, but just because you know what happens in the book does not mean that you had the critical thinking experience of going through each word and each thought of that author's mind. And according to a 2024 study by Statistica, a whopping 86% of students said that they were using artificial intelligence tools for their schoolwork, and almost a fourth of them use them on a daily basis. It's this prioritization of instant gratification over any kind of pursuit of knowledge, and it makes complex issues that should have nuance get simplified down to a surface level idea that doesn't carry the same amount of meaning or critical thinking that it would have before. And it doesn't allow for deeper conversations or deeper connections. AI, generative summaries, and search tools don't allow us to sit with a story or information or even think about how we could draw our own personal connections from it, because that's truly creativity, is drawing connections in your own life to things that you read or you ingest in your everyday life. And while it might be easy, it might save your time, I think we're sacrificing way too much for just a quick answer that AI could give you. A lot of people have been calling this brain rot, which is the term of the year, I guess. But it truly is making us more susceptible to this collective consciousness that tells us all what to do and doesn't allow us to think for ourselves or be individualistic at all. Even if it does seem easier, it actually doesn't make us feel good either. There's fatigue and burnout that comes from constant consumption. And while you're scrolling and it might feel like your brain is on a break, your brain is actually continuing to think, and this constant influx of information is deregulating your nervous system. I read this study from the Newport Institute where it said that even though you think you're just scrolling, it doesn't imply that you're simply watching something. There's still emotions attached, and it's personal, whether you feel it or not. And for young people, the impact of what they're seeing on social media can be extremely deregulating. And the longer they do it, the more it's going to impact them. Grant calls this zombie scrolling syndrome and says that in addition to producing negative emotions, it also prevents us from engaging in positive in real life experiences, or organic bids for connection. These are opportunities for positive interactions and emotions that are happening all around us, but that we miss when we continue to scroll and dive into our phone instead of the real world. There's even associations between higher screen time and lower psychological well-being. The National Association of Medicine published a study that after 1 hour a day of use, more hours of daily screen time were associated with lower psychological well-being, including less curiosity, lower self-control, more distractibility, more difficulty making friends, less emotional stability, being more difficult to care for, and inability to finish tasks. And that's just after 1 hour of daily use. I use so much more than 1 hour, and I know that most people do. And the study also said that among 14 to 17-year-olds, high users of screens, which was defined as 7+ hours a day, were more than twice as likely to ever have been diagnosed with depression. And there are so many studies that show this association between screen time and poor levels of mental health that just contribute to a general unhappiness. And that's because we feel like we're happy when we're scrolling. It's this dopamine loop that reinforces every time we scroll this new kind of feeling in our brain that, ooh, we can see something extra and it's exciting while it lasts. But then when we get that rush of satisfaction from scrolling through our feeds, we want to scroll even more and more and more. And then it turns into a compulsive behavior that can be an addiction-like pattern that makes us feel disconnected from real life. And then once the scrolling stops, there's a tendency to feel overstimulated by all the information and even forget what you just saw 2 seconds ago because your brain can't handle all the things that you just scrolled through in the last few hours. But even though you feel like you might not consciously remember it, you will have ingested all these pressures of lifestyles of other people that can be impressionable on you when it comes to beauty standards or trends or lifestyles that might be unattainable to you that make you feel bad about yourself and you might not even know why. But I'm not saying this to make everybody hopeless. There are solutions, and I want to share some that I found. In The Art of Science and Connection, I found this guide that they call the 5-3-1 guide, and you can kind of think of it like getting your 10,000 steps a day. It's a guide that shows you what you can be doing to make more deep connections with people. And I guess I'm a kind of person who likes to set goals for myself and use checklists to check them off, so this really helps me to just have something quantifiable to do if I do ever feel lonely. The first one of this, the 5, is connect with 5 different people every week. And so that can be reaching out via text if that's where you need to start. But what I try to do is call 5 different people a week and catch up with friends that I maybe haven't talked to in a while, or even family members that I feel like I haven't called, like my grandparents. I feel like I should be calling them way more than I do. And after doing this, I think I'm going to call them more because I don't know why I'm not. Like, I love these people and I just don't talk to them because I think I don't have the time. And then the 3 in this is maintain at least 3 close relationships. The way that I think of it, aside from calling your friends, is checking up on them. And that doesn't have to count towards your connect with 5 different people a week. This can be specific things that you know about a friend. Like maybe you know that they're really into pottery and you go to a farmer's market and you see a really cute pot and you decide that you're either gonna buy it for them or just take a picture of it for them and send it to them so they can know that you're thinking of them, and not only thinking of them in a general way by like sending a meme that doesn't even relate to them, but that's specific to them and that means that you know them. And the 1 to this guide is have 1 hour of quality interaction daily. This I try to do in person, and I know an hour can be a lot daily for people, especially if you're working from home or you just have multiple jobs or other things that you have to do in a day. But the best way that I've found to do this is modify your daily routine that you usually would do alone and include another person in it. If you were going to go on a walk anyway, maybe invite someone else. Or if you were going to go work out, maybe invite that person to work out with you. And then you can have that connection instead of just being alone and in your head. And I also saw this YouTube video of this person talking about the resurgence of critical thinking and commonplace notebooks. And I've seen so many other videos too, just about paying attention to the things that you like and writing them down or making a journal of it or even creating a digital garden and keeping track of all these things so that you can continue to make these connections even when it seems like all the information is too much. If you can be intentional about it, then you can see these things that you like and you can even start to create these things yourself if you're seeing connections between them. And all of these things, as I go through all of these solutions, it just seems like the main solution is being intentional, which maybe is not as easy as it sounds, but if we can all just try to pay attention, try to not go on autopilot whenever we can, then maybe we can make deeper connections and not be susceptible to the superficial versions of social media that are being recommended to us all the time. I also found this really cute article that talked about brain stimulating activities and uses real science and recommends real things that we can do to help reverse that brain rot and give us even more of a feeling of purpose in our lives. A few of the recommendations that they had were to 1, learn new information and process that information on a deeper level. And so that can be watching a documentary and discussing it with a friend, reading a book or an article in a new genre, or attending a lecture or a guest speaker. And I know that in New York and San Francisco, they have these new things that come to bars that are lectures that you can sign up for. And I know that they've been selling out, like people love it. So it's obvious that people want to learn, people want to be intellectually stimulated. We're just not seeing that online. And it's really cool that there are events out there that people can go to continue to learn and do this. This is a lot, and I just threw a lot of information at you, but I guess I really wanted to try to be positive about this because this is not the end of the world. That's not the point of this video, but there are some concerning things that came up through my research that I just wanted to address, and I want to make sure that everyone knows that there are ways that you can continue to make connections with people, even though it feels like it's dire and everything is so superficial and AI is taking over. There's still ways to make these deep connections, and I think that if we all prioritize being intentional about our lives and intentional about the connections that we make, we can be infinitely happier and hopefully reverse some of that concerning data that continues to trend not so well for our generation. But I believe in our generation, and I think we can do it. Well, that is all I've got for this week's Vaguely Related episode. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you have any comments or any questions, please add them below. I feel like I always try to tackle these bigger topics that just have so much to them. So of course, there's going to be so many things I wasn't able to cover. And I don't take any offense by this. If you do feel like there was something I didn't cover, please add it below. And maybe I could even make a part 2 of it later. But for now, keep an eye out for next week's episode. And if you want to, like and subscribe. If you don't worry about it. I don't care. I'm just making this content for myself. Thanks. Bye. If you've watched all my episodes, you'll notice that I'm in a different place. But next episode, I might still be here, might be at a different place in Wisconsin, but hopefully by the episode after that, I will be in San Francisco. It's really exciting. I have been in New York for the last 3 years, and then I was in Europe for the last few months, just kind of writing, trying to figure out my novel and figure things out. As once my lease was up in my New York apartment, I kind of decided that I just wasn't going to renew and I was going to be a little bit of a nomad for a while. And I just got this opportunity to sublet this place in San Francisco for a while and continue working to pay rent while I make content and write my novel, and I'm really excited about it. And I don't really know anyone in San Francisco, so if anyone here is in San Francisco, or if you know of any opportunities to be a part of writing groups or just different like intellectual communities in San Francisco, I would really appreciate it if you just let me know, because it's a new experience for me and I'm really excited about it. So that's a little update from me if you care.